Hi folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today I am going to share a video about making quilling paper monograms. And the setup of this video is going to be slightly different. Rather than having an exact tutorial and sharing supplies at the beginning and finished product at the end, this is just going to be a little bit of a looser form. I have some examples here of different kinds of monograms that I made, quickly just making some mock-ups for this project. I'm going to show how to make a letter template, and then some ideas of how to do the outline, and then again at the end how to make the inside of your monograms. And I will also be demonstrating how to mount a monogram if you choose to do that as well. So let's get started. First off, to make your monogram template, obviously if you feel comfortable you can draw this freehand or trace something that you've found that you like. But if you prefer making it on a computer, having it exact, an easy way to do that is to go to a website called Canva, Canva.com. Canva is great for making all kinds of printed materials. You can make any custom size that you like. Because we're going to be printing this out on my home printer, I'm doing 8.5 by 11 inches, which is a standard printer paper, and that's going to show up as a blank sheet. As you can see here, no backgrounds, no nothing. There's a lot of ideas on the side. We're not doing any of those. What we're going to do is go down the left side to where it says text. We're going to be making what's essentially a letter, right? That's what a monogram is. We're making a text box. You can add that right to the middle and it will show up as that you can enter your own text there. We're going to delete that information that's in that box so it's empty. And then we're going to enter whatever letter you choose, or letters or words. This would all be the same process. I'm choosing to do a letter L because it is a simple shape, but it does have a good amount of edges and turns, which are always helpful to practice. From there, you can go to the top of the site and change your font. You can choose anything you like. There are lots of different ways to categorize it. Canva is really good about the script option or the calligraphy. You can get very fancy. You could do anything you like. Canva also organizes their fonts by type if you have an idea of what you're looking for, but you're not exactly sure what you like. We're going for a pretty standard Times New Roman, a nice blocky, very traditional, classic monogram. At that point, you can drag the corners to stretch it out to whatever size you like. If you would like to, you can center your template to your page. You could also, if you wanted to, depending on the size, print out more than one monogram. It is up to you. It is very easy to customize this how you would like. You can change your text color if you'd like to make it a little bit lighter, use maybe a little bit less printer ink. And in a similar idea, I'm going to go up to the effects bar towards the top and go over to the option that says hollow. And I'm also going to drop down the thickness of that line. I think this works really well when you're doing outlines because you can see exactly where that outline is. There's no second guessing. Are you moving in too far? You get a nice crisp outline of what you are looking for in your monogram. So it's very easy to fill that in with quilling later on. Once you are happy with your monogram, you're going to go to the share button. There is an option for printer design, but FYI, in Canva, that means professional printing, which is probably not what you want for this situation. It's much easier to download as a PDF, and all of this is under the share option. And then you're going to download that to your computer. That should only take a few seconds. When it's done, you'll get a prompt. You can go to your downloaded monogram and print that so you're ready to go. Now I have my printed monogram template. I'm going to trim off some of this excess paper. I don't need as much around the edges. And then I'm going to show two different ways that you can get your monogram started. The first way is going to be to emboss the outline on what's going to be your final mounting surface. I'm going to be using an embossing tool, which looks fairly similar to a quilling tool. The one I have actually came from the Dollar Tree, believe it or not. But it's just a plastic tool with two ends on it, and the ends are like a little ball. They're not sharp, and you're going to hold this in the way that you would hold any sort of writing tool. I'm placing my template on top of what I'm going to be mounting my quilling on, and then I'm going to press in fairly hard to the top of my template in order to make an indent on the mat board, which is what I'm using as my final surface. Makes an indent onto the mat board below. Mat board is pretty strong, it's very sturdy, but embossing will show up on it, and it is really a nice surface for your finished mounting because it does hold up very, very well to the quilling and the glue. Now I'm going all the way around, being very careful not to move my template. It might not be a bad idea to use some lightweight washi tape or something to hold down your template that won't leave a residue on your mat board afterwards. That is an idea. But just going around and around, being very careful not to miss any part of my template. And then when you remove that paper, you will have an outline of your letter on your mat board. Kind of hard to see on camera, but it is definitely there. You can see it and feel it in person. At this point, you would use a heavyweight quilling paper, maybe a cardstock or one specifically made for on-edge quilling, and you would dip and cut and place your quilling right on that template, and then you would let it dry and you would fill it in. There's not a lot of room for mistakes. There's not a lot of wiggle room with that method, so I prefer to use the method you may have seen me do many, many times before for different projects, but using a template, covering with wax paper or another surface on a cork board and building my quilling that way. I am planning on making a video more in depth on the embossing technique, but for now, because this is what I do more often, I thought I would show once again how to do on-edge quilling specifically for a monogram, because I do get these questions quite a lot. I'm going to start off with making a double thick strip of quilling paper. I do this by folding my paper in half, adding some glue all the way down one edge of that half, and then folding it back over and squeezing it so there's no air bubbles. That will make a very nice sturdy piece of quilling paper that is really great for making outlines. Like I said, with the embossed method, they do sell commercially made thicker weight quilling paper strips, or you can always cut your own out of a cardstock or another option. I personally like making them this way because I know my colors will match exactly what I'm doing on the outside and the inside because it's all the same paper. And it also just keeps my inventory of quilling paper down. I'm not buying a lot of different supplies, but it is absolutely up to your preference what you would like to do for your on-edge work, whether it's this way or buying and making thicker weight paper. You're going to want to let that double thick strip dry completely before you start making your outline. But once that's dry, you will want to tear off a little bit from both ends of the strip. The torn edges are going to make it so you have a nice smooth transition when you get to the end of the strip, joining it to another side. What I like to do is use my needle nose bottle full of Elmer's just white glue all glue, making a few dots on a straighter, at least part without any bends to it. That's where I like to start my template outlines. So you can see there I have about an inch right on one of these straighter parts. I put pins on either side to keep it in line, and then I let that dry for just a little bit at the great starting off point to give you a nice solid anchor. You can, if you'd like to, brush any excess glue away. And then once I give that a moment or two to kind of set up, I start bending and adjusting my outline quilling paper, my on-edge strip, around my template. I put pins in the corners to get a nice sharp edge, and I can bend it around that pin. Around the curves, I put in a little bit of glue and a few pins to get the right curve. I do have another video specifically about on-edge quilling where I show this a little bit closer up and a little bit more detail. I'm going to add a link to that video in the description box for this one. But since not everyone is going to be making an L in this exact size and this exact font, I'm not going to take a terrible amount of time to talk about the ins and the outs of how I went around this particular shape. That video will be more helpful in figuring out where you need to do pins and which side of the paper you need to put your pins on when you are going around curves or straight lines. So for now, I just wanted to show the basic idea of how to use your pins and a little bit of glue on a cork board as another option to make the outline for your monogram. I did also just want to note how to join your paper strips. Chances are, whatever type of strip you use, it may not be long enough for the complete outline of your monogram, or maybe you want to use more than one color strip, or whatever the case might be. When you get to the end of one of your strips, all you really are going to do is just add a dot of glue to the end and then join another strip. I had mentioned before about having torn edges and how that makes a much smoother transition. It really is important. It might seem like a very small idea, but when paper is cut, it does have much more of a sharp edge to it. When paper is torn, there's little fibers that will grab onto the next sheet and make, like I said, a much smoother, much flatter, much nicer transition. So at this point, I have my first strip all lined up right on the edge. Everything is glued, nice and neat. And I'm going to get my second paper ready to go. This one had a tiny little bend on the end, so I just kind of ran it through my fingers a couple of times to make sure that it was straight again. A tiny dot of glue right on the end of the first strip, and then just line up the second one. I like to sometimes pinch it with my tweezers just to really get a good grip. And that's all there is to it. You can now keep going around the rest of your curve, and when you get to where the two sides meet, you're going to do exactly the same thing, but this time you have to tear off whatever excess you have. That part can be a little bit tricky because you do sort of have to wiggle your paper a little bit after you've done all this nice work, getting everything in line and pinned and so nice and neat right on the edge of your template. So just be careful with that part. And then you're going to join it in the exact same way like I just did, with a little bit of glue. Pinch it if you need to. And that's all you have to do for your outline of your monogram template when you're doing it on a corkboard. Benefit of doing your monograms this way is that you do have more control over what happens if you make a mistake. When you're doing it on the emboss method, once it's glued, it's glued. You know, this way I can take the pins out, even though I'm using a little bit of glue to tack down the outline. I can move it if I need to. Once my monogram outline is all done, I'm going to take the pins out, and then I can fill it in as needed. Just like the benefit of using the corkboard and the pins for the outline, doing it this way, and when you're working on the inside, you are able to fix your mistakes. You're able to play around with it, maybe experiment, see if you like some things before you have them finally glued to your mounting surface. Here I have the monogram that I outlined, and I filled it in with some pretty simple beehive quilling. If you're not familiar with beehive, I can link to that in the description box below. At this point, I have to get it off of my wax paper and onto my final surface. This is the con of doing it this way. This does require a little bit of faith and some extra tools. I have a needle tool, some tweezers, some glue, a little paintbrush, and then I have another piece of that same mat board that I was using earlier when I did the embossing. I also have a ruler here. I think that's always helpful just to make sure everything is centered and lined up and straight. Now, to get my monogram off of my wax paper, I'm going to run a small tool underneath to loosen up all that little bits of glue that I used to get it where I wanted it in the first place. Now remember, this wax paper is not your final surface. That template is not your final surface. After you get it off of here, you're going to get rid of that. You do not need that anymore for this project. Because I chose something to fill in my outline like the beehive quilling, it made it very sturdy. There's a lot of paper there, which made this very easy to remove. And that's something you're going to want to consider if you're just getting started using templates and this method where you're taking it off of your wax paper. You want to get your piece as sturdy as you can. That might mean being very strategic in where you put your paper, maybe using a little bit more paper, not so much negative space, until you get in the habit of loosening it from your wax paper and moving it around. Because I know that makes people very nervous. But paper is a lot stronger than you think it is, especially if you are smart in how you are filling in your monograms. So at that point, I just trimmed off any excess glue that I might have seen around the outside of my letter. You can see there, completely filled in, still in very good shape, even though I was moving it around quite a bit in my hands. Now I'm ready to put this on my final surface. I like to, like I said earlier, use some sort of ruler to make sure that my letter is as centered as I want it to be, and it also helps it stay straight, especially if it's a flat letter like the letter L. I'm just lining up my ruler so it's even on both sides, and then my letter can sit right on top of that. And once I have my ruler where I want it, I'm going to pick up my piece very carefully, turn it over, and put some glue on the back side. Just some dots here and there. You do not have to cover it. Just trying to get a bit on the edge and a bit in the center here and there. Another benefit of using a good amount of quilling paper like in this beehive technique is that you don't have to be super careful where your glue is on the underside, because you're not going to have that much seepage. You won't be able to see it really between the beehive pieces. There is some methods of filling in your quilling. You're going to have a lot more open space and you're going to see maybe some glue, and you'll have to clean that out later. I have my straight edge and using some tweezers, carefully getting that where I like it. And then it's also a good idea to kind of press down on your monogram as it's drying. I usually use my same corkboard, something on top to keep everything flat underneath. Really, again, paper is very strong. You can see this whole bag, this whole cup of tools is something I do too, just to keep it flat. And then once it's dry, you have your finished monogram. Nice and clean in the center. If you did have excess glue around the edges, you can brush that off with a paintbrush. I also have a couple other ones that I showed in the beginning. This one sort of an ombre technique with some flowers. I did notice after I mounted it that I got a little wanky on the side there. Like I said, I was kind of rushing through these examples, but just some simple flower shapes on the inside of that one in 3 shades of purple. And then also very popular, you're going to see this a lot, is kind of a open template where you have some on-edge pieces that extend past the outline of your monogram. So I did that here and then added some begonia flowers that I made in a video in the past. And I also want to show what you could do if you wanted to add a little bit more color. So this is a type of monogram I actually used to sell when I did that type of thing, and I have kind of a loop technique that I would use, and then I would mount that on one color paper, cut that out with an X-Acto knife, and then glue that entire thing to another patterned paper that was covering a piece of mat board. So it was like many layers of different colors. Just something to think about, other ways that you could incorporate more colors and more ideas to your monograms. So a lot of information in this post. Like I said, I'm going to work on that embossing video. Any questions you have, leave them in the comments. I will link to any other videos you might need to see in the description box. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you'll be around for my next video. And thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.